Well, welcome everybody. It's great to be together. My name is Rick Berg. Very happy to be with you to share a few thoughts on grief and loss. I want to thank our sponsors for tonight's lecture, First Memorial Funeral Services of Garden of Memories in Victoria, BC. Thank you so much for supporting me in this series, and it is just so good to be together. Together online. Love to be able to be live, but this is where we're at. So we need to celebrate that as well. At least we can be able to share the message and to think and reflect upon grief and loss, because all of us are going through grief and loss in our lives. And I think particularly during COVID, we have this fresh insight into grief that needs to be explored, because COVID has brought loss into our lives. It's part of who we are. It's part of what we experienced, and we're grieving people. Coming out of the pandemic, hopefully, we'll understand a little bit more about our grieving process, because it's important to take a look at loss and to see how it's impacted us. One of the ways that we need to look at loss is through something called making meaning. Making meaning of life's losses. That's the topic for tonight. And I want to share three different ideas in regards to making meaning. How do you do this? How do you make meaning of losses? Well, number one, interpretation. Number two, examination. And number three, integration. Miss one of those steps and loss makes no sense. See, there's a difference between sense making and meaning making. And in loss, sometimes things don't make sense. There's difficult steps in the grief journey, and yet each one is crucial in moving forward and discovering a life that is different. Moving from sense making to meaning making is one of those. And that's what I want to talk about tonight. So how do you make meaning of life's losses? Well, interpretation. You've heard the phrase, it's a matter of interpretation. Really, that means that you need to look at things from a different perspective or from a different angle. You see, loss happens in our lives many times over. And often, sometimes, it doesn't make sense. Losses don't always make sense. And when they don't, we become angry, we become sad, we become confused, because we can't make sense of them. You know, a suicide. Can you make sense of that sometimes? It's difficult. You know, sometimes the doctor's misdiagnosis from our point of view over a loved one who has died. We're trying to make sense of that circumstance. And we can't. Somebody who was killed in a car accident. It doesn't make sense. Why? You know, sense making is filled with the whys of life. Why me? Why not? How come? This doesn't make sense to me. And as soon as you place grief into the details of what can't make sense, you go into a journey that's difficult. Because the details don't make sense all the time. And sometimes we can't even find out the details of circumstances. Sometimes the details really don't matter. Why? Because someone has died. And it's done. And no detail or no understanding or no making sense will bring them back. We can't figure things out sometimes. And when we can't figure things out, our mind spins. It spins for answers. Sometimes, often, answers that can never be found. We want to make sense of things. That's interpretation. And we spend a lot of our initial grief journey perhaps in trying to interpret events, interpret situations, trying to understand things. Why? And it leads nowhere but down. Confusion. Anger. Now, I'm not saying details are not important to us sometimes, but they don't lead us in a way forward. Sometimes there is no answers to why loss happens. We live in a broken world. Things happen that don't make sense. And that's why the second part of making meaning is important. And that's the examination phase. So we go from interpretation to examination. Moving forward. It's when we begin to not look specifically at the details, but we begin to examine our relationship with the person who's died as most important. What's most important? The details of the death or the person who has died? I think you know the answer. We've gone now beyond why. And we begin to spend time with the person who has died and to begin to remember our relationship with them. That's significant. Regardless of what we don't understand, what we can't make sense of. You see, there's never enough time. There's never enough time. The person who's died, there's always one more day we wish we could have had, that we wish we would have experienced, we wish we were given. But this examine phase, as we think about the person and not the circumstance of what they died or how they died, leads to what was given, not what wasn't given. That's huge. What we had with this person, not what we didn't have. Do you see the difference there? It changed our heart to one of thankfulness and gratitude for what that person meant to us personally, how they impacted our lives, what they gave to us. We turn from what we can't understand to who we love and who we need to honor. Who we need to honor. The third phase of meaning making is integration. How will I now include this person into my next chapter? There's a process here, isn't there? How do I include this person into my life? Sense making doesn't allow us to include, because it's trying to force us to understand that relationship with a person who died and is gone forever. Sense making encourages us to spend time in the details, spend time not on the person itself, but on everything that's around that person that doesn't bring meaning to our lives. Meaning making is including in your life that person, that relationship that is different. Meaning making now. Meaning making is tough. Because at the very core, meaning making is about how do we find meaning in the suffering. That's the core concept. And you are suffering. You are suffering because grief hurts. And you're missing that person. You're missing the person. Meaning making focuses upon the person and that relationship. And suffering that you're experiencing is because you miss that person on all they were to you that is important. You're not suffering over why or the reason or the method they died. You're really suffering because you miss and because you still love. You miss a person. And this is what you miss about that person. What they meant to you, what they taught you, what you learned from them, what they gave to you. This is all as a result of the grief that you're experiencing. You are experiencing depth, deep learnings. You're making meaning of that loss as you invite that person into your life again who you miss and whom you're learning from. In a very real way, meaning making is saying, I'm not going to waste this grief. I'm not going to waste this grief. This grief is a result of somebody I loved and who I miss. I'm going to be changed by it. I'm not going to let this grief destroy me, make me angry or bitter. I'm going to see what it does in me. I want it to change me where I need to be changed. I'm going to allow the change to fill me up with something new and different. And maybe this is just what I've been waiting for. That allows me to examine my life in a way that helps me to move forward a little bit different, but in a good and healthy way. I was trying to make meaning of my first wife's death. It didn't make sense to me. She got cancer at 42 and she died at 47. Oh, I prayed. I prayed up to the very end that she would live. I didn't want her to leave. I didn't want her to leave me. I didn't want her to leave her 4 children. It made no sense to me. The cancer, the ovarian cancer that gripped her body made no sense. There's no history. There was no why. Why, Pam? Oh man, I tried to make sense of it for so long. But I couldn't. I had to somehow try to make meaning of it. I needed to look at how this grief and this loss could change my life. And it did. It did. In ways that I've never even would consider, never thought of, never experienced. I didn't like it. I didn't want to go through the grief journey. But if I would have spent my whole life trying to make sense of something that couldn't make made sense of, I would have missed out on life. And what life wanted to bring me. What life wanted to bring me still. Oh yes, we still miss Pam. and things don't always make sense to me, but I've learned that the only way forward is to try my best to make some meaning and to be changed. To be changed. Thank you for joining me. Again, I'd like to thank First Memorial Garden Memories for sponsoring this lecture. Please feel free to pass this forward and share this information with others who might be grieving. Take care.